What is the role of religion in our ever-changing world? From the News Channel 5 network, this is Issues of Faith.
Hello, everyone. What role does our faith play in our health and recovery? That's what we're talking about today. Happy to have with us Dr. Manny Sethi, Vanderbilt orthopedic trauma surgeon, who has just written a new book. Dr. Sethi, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Why did you write the book? Let's talk about that first. Why did you write the book?
Well, thanks so much for having me here, Ben. You know, in trauma, you see a whole host of injuries. They can be minor, they can be mostly severe. I'm a orthopedic trauma surgeon at Vanderbilt, so we tend to get the more severe cases. And I've always been interested in why you have some patients who do very well after just very devastating injuries, and they go back to live a very full and complete life. And you have some patients that they have maybe injuries that are not so severe, and the injury really takes its toll, and they never really get back to who they were before the injury. And that problem, it's something as a surgeon, as a doctor, I've always wanted to better understand because I want to help my own patients. And so this book was an effort to really explore what are the factors in survival and success after major polytrauma or patients with multiple traumatic injuries.
You followed 8 specific cases.
Yes.
And this started out, it was going to be more of a research type book. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
And what changed?
So the book actually was going to start out as a scientific paper. As a surgeon at Vanderbilt, we do a lot of research, and I was always very interested in what are the factors in survival and really success and outcomes after major orthopedic trauma injuries. So at first I thought, could it be the time to transport to Vanderbilt? Is it life flight helicopter? Is it ambulance? Is it the blood loss in the operating room? Is it the amount of time in the operating room? What are those factors that drive outcome? As I looked at this, I didn't really find that really influenced things. But as I spent time talking to patients, and specifically these 8 patients in this book, it was incredible because they all had very similar things to say, that it was their faith in God, their loving family, and a supportive community. And I just realized that, you know, sometimes these factors are not scientific. And as I spent 3 years with these patients, I realized there's much more to it, and that faith plays such a strong role in healing. And that's how this book came about.
Did that surprise you? You obviously started out thinking it was something else. Were you surprised that the role faith played?
It didn't surprise me that it plays a role, but what did surprise me is that as a surgeon, maybe I don't play the role that I thought. With these patients, many of them, they found God through what happened to them, through their injuries. Some had gone to church when they were younger, but had maybe strayed, and it really brought them back. Now, as a doctor, you know, sometimes you think, well, it's my hands that are helping this person. It's our team, and to some degree that's true. But there are so many factors beyond just the surgeon and just the hospital, and that is really what I think you leave this book with, and what I took away as a doctor. The other thing I think I learned from this, and that is so important, is that to help patients and to help people, you really have to know their stories, and you have to know who they are. So I spent 3 years with eight folks, and I got to know their brothers, their sisters, their wives, their husbands, to really learn who they are. And so now, when I take care of patients, really on the front end, I am very, very interested in who this person is. And sometimes people are asking, and this is in the thick of the moment, I'm asking questions, and family, why are you asking me this? But I think it is so important to know who a patient is to help take care of them.
With this understanding that you gained from this book, what impact has that had, if any, on your faith?
You know, I have to tell you that it's strengthened my faith in God, and that, you know, there are certain times where things happen, and especially in trauma, and you just feel that they are out of your control. And sometimes you just have to believe that there is a higher power. And I feel very blessed to take care of patients and to do what I do. And having been a part of the lives of these 8 patients, and I really feel even more blessed now. I'll tell you a story. About 8 months ago, I was doing a surgery as a patient from Johnson City. Now, this was not an acute trauma. This was trauma that had happened, and it had been about a year after that, and they had some problems, and I was trying to help. But as I was in the operating room, I got into some trouble. I got into some bleeding, and it was blood was coming everywhere. I could not find where this was coming from, and for 1 second, I just stopped and I prayed, God, please help me help this person right now. And literally in 30 seconds, we found it. And so I think, as a doctor, and especially as an orthopedic trauma surgeon, sometimes people want you to have the answer instantaneously and immediately, and that you are the be-all, end-all, but you're really not. And I think that you have to have faith in a higher power when you're taking care of patients, and that is really what I have come to after spending some time writing this.
Sometimes there's a tension between faith and science, and I've heard that in the medical community. And I don't know if there would be people in the medical community uncomfortable with what you just said, that you would stop and pray, or even that faith can have a determination in outcomes for people. So is that somewhat controversial? How has it been received?
So far it's been received very positively. For example, I was in the dialysis unit at Vanderbilt a few days ago, and I ran into a nurse who read the book, and she had a family member who was ill, and she had told me how much it had meant to her. So I think that, I think that faith and science can be reconciled, because I think that without having faith, sometimes you can't understand science. I mean, for some of these patients to go through what they did, to be back in the game, like I'll give you an example. There's a patient, Jamie Simmons, who's in this book. Jamie was driving down the street in a motorcycle when he got hit by a van. He broke almost every bone in his body. When he came to the emergency room at Vanderbilt, he was essentially dead for all intents and purposes. And we got into the operating room, and there were a series of kind of things that just happened to take place. For example, the trauma surgeon, the general surgery trauma surgeon, was a very good friend of mine. We had very good chemistry together. I had happened to be very close by when this happened. Whole series of things. We were able to, that night, stop the bleeding in his leg, and 18 surgeries later, he's back to building tour buses. So now part of that is definitely faith. But some of that is also science, in that he's been able to heal these devastating injuries. He has gained his mobility, etc. And I think part of that is our rehab protocols, the science. But I think that they can be reconciled by, and I would just say, having faith that the human body can do incredible things, which is the science.
But are you around the other side? Are there some in the profession that are like, I can't go there. I don't believe in God. It's just kind of, I just can't go there. Is that something that's there?
I would say that I think that faith is a very hard thing to talk about in the hospital, and really in any public setting, because I think it's not so politically correct anymore to do that, and I think we need to do more of it. But yes, I think it is. Definitely there are folks who would find this sort of, in their own words, hokey. But just having thought about this for many years now, I think that faith is something that we got to talk about in medicine.
Which I think is fascinating. And so when you start, again, this was going to be a science sort of exercise. At what point did you go, wait a minute, there's something, it's not a scientific thing, this really is a faith thing or a family thing? Was it after the 10th person you interviewed, or like at what point did you go, wait a minute, this is something a little different than I thought here?
It's when it really came to me. I remember the night it came to me. I had interviewed a lot of patients, and I'd recorded the interviews and, you know, taken notes. And I remember that my wife was pregnant with our first child, who's now 3 years old. We have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I remember, so she was pregnant and she was really hungry. So I said, you know, honey, I'll get up and get you something. And I got her something, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I started. It was 2 or 3 in the morning. I just started transcribing some of these notes. And as I looked at each story, it just hit me. It just hit me that, you know, it's almost like each of these patients, while their injuries are so different, their mechanisms of injury are so different, they are telling the same story in terms of their comeback. And that's when I realized that there was more to this.
All right, I want to take a break, then we'll come back and talk about a couple of the cases in here, because I think it's really interesting. So we'll take a break, be back right after this.